Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Merlin, Season 3, Episode 10, The Sorcerer's Shadow. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So at the start of the episode, we're following a person about Merlin's age named Gilly, who is heading to Camelot to enter the decennial tournament, which is a tournament that anyone can enter and that has no rules officially. Therefore, you can basically use whatever tactics you choose to in order to try to win. And while he's on the way there, he gets accosted by a couple of thugs who steal his sword, and his belongings are left scattered on the ground, but he does pick them up. He does end up arriving in Camelot, where he finds that the thugs are also entering the tournament. Meanwhile, Arthur is planning to enter the tournament, of course, but Morgana then manipulates the tactics to have Uther compete as well, which will mean that Uther and Arthur are going to have to fight each other at some point, and she hopes that this will drive a wedge or a rift between them. We then have the actual tournament where we see Gilly competing, and we find out that he's competing using magic through a ring that helps him to focus his powers that he brings out once he gets to Camelot. And Merlin and Gaius also figure out that he is using magic, though as he's not immediately hostile, they don't try to take negative action against him at first, or even later. And then we, of course, see Uther competing, Arthur competing, Gilly competing, and then the thugs competing. And at the end of one of the days of the tournament, Gilly ends up killing one of the thugs. The other thug was just in the audience, and this is when he tells Merlin that he is going to withdraw from the competition because it's the first time he's ever killed somebody and it doesn't sit well with him. However, then when he goes to the bar, all the patrons there are like, wow, you did so amazing, you're great, psyching him up, and he decides to continue to compete anyways. Arthur and Uther do end up competing against each other, and Arthur puts on a good show but does ultimately end up letting his father win. And that leaves then Uther and Gilly in the finals. Merlin, before the fight, goes to Gilly and is like, please don't use magic here, you're going to die. Or if you kill Uther, you'll be the person who killed the king, like you cannot do this. And Gilly refuses, so Merlin runs out, summons Kilgara, and Kilgara basically says, look, you can either do nothing, let the boy kill Uther, let Arthur's time come, or, you can save Uther, but then you run the risk of Uther killing the boy. So your choice is thus, do with it what you will. And ultimately, Merlin does decide to interfere in the fight, and he does interfere when Gilly uses magic to get an advantage. Merlin then uses his magic to even the score, ultimately leading to Gilly losing, but not being killed, which is the best outcome that could have come about. As Gilly is leaving, Merlin has a conversation with him about how magic is not meant to be used for violence, and that there will come a time when magic will once again be accepted within Camelot, and Gilly leaves with a newfound appreciation for his father, who never used magic, and he realizes now that the reason why he never used magic isn't because he was scared of Uther, but because he understood how magic can corrupt, and didn't want that for himself. And then at the end, we also have Arthur and Uther and Morgana at dinner, and Morgana is there looking smug, expecting a rift to have opened up. However, then Uther reveals that he's followed Arthur's progress with the sword since he was a boy, and he fully knew that Arthur let him win, and he appreciated it, and that it is those actions that have now convinced him that he is ready to be king. And this, of course, upsets Morgana, but Arthur and Uther are having their father-son bonding moment. And that is how the episode ended. It's now time to get into our rankings, and we'll rank on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, followed by the personal ranking list, which is all about vibes. So starting with our mostly objective rank values, we had our single episode supporting character introduction, and this was Gilly. There were a couple of thugs. They technically had names, Tinder and Noller, but they aren't really stated in the episode, the names. They're kind of just on like the cast list with the names, so I didn't count points for them, but should be noted the thugs had names, and the main single episode supporting character that had any value to the episode was Gilly. That was worth 1 point. And then we had 1 point for our single episode supporting character growth, which also was Gilly. Normally, I consider anything that we see of a character in the first episode they're introduced in to be part of their introduction. However, in this case, I felt like the character growth in like with regards to magic and Gilly's feelings on magic and Gilly's kind of going through all of those emotions of first time killing someone, wanting to withdraw and feeling that guilt, but then it becoming normal because he was hyped up, and then ultimately deciding that his father, who he had looked down on as a fearful coward, was actually very strong because he was able to resist the corrupting influence of magic and knew well enough to fear that corrupting influence. And so I felt like the character growth throughout this episode was significant enough to count that as well, which is why that brings us to 2 points. And then bringing us up to our final score, we have 4 points for the world building, and this is the existence of the Decennial Tournament, which is a tournament that has no rules, that anybody is able to enter. Now, honorable mention, before we give our final score, there was a lot of negative behaviors and messaging happening in the tournament. It was not just Gilly cheating with magic. There were other characters like Nolar using like a hidden weapon to kill a knight, to slice, like when he's about to lose, he slices the ankle of the knight and then gets the upper hand and is able to kill him with an axe. Um, Gilly obviously is using sorcery, which is a bit of a cheat skill, given that he doesn't actually have the skills to make it far in the tournament without magic. And there were a few other examples with other fighters as well, where, they were just using some pretty gross tactics. However, the reason I did not take points for this is because this tournament has no rules. The whole point of the tournament is that it is a tournament anyone can enter and you can use any weapon at your disposal in any way that you want to. There's no rules. You're not required to let your opponent live. You're not required to kill them. It's no holds barred. And because of that, even though there was gross behaviors happening, they technically fell within the rules of this particular tournament, as this tournament specifically stated it had no rules. So for that reason, I did not take the points, but I did want to point out that yes, there was quite a bit of negative messaging and behavior going on. And that then brings us to our final score of a 6 out of 10 for this episode. And our mostly objective ranking list so far. In first, we have the Tears of Uther Pendragon, The Eye of the Phoenix, Love in the Time of Dragons, Goblin's Gold, The Crystal Cave, The Changeling. This episode comes in 7th, The Sorcerer's Shadow, Queen of Hearts, The Castle of Firen, and then in last place so far, we have Gwaine. Now, my personal ranking for this episode, I did personally take points because I did find that the cheating was kind of gross, but at the same time, I did overall like the episode. I found the fights were entertaining. I like the concept of a no holds barred tournament. We did get significant character growth in the supporting character of the episode. It also gave Merlin an opportunity to actually listen to what Kilgara says, because he does that very rarely, though he has done it before, but for a while there, he wasn't listening at all. And even Kilgara calls him out in this one, where he's like, you call me to talk because you want to talk, but you're not prepared to listen. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what Merlin does. He calls on Kilgara to get advice and then like very rarely ever follows it. In this case, though, he does ultimately make a decision that actually turns out well, which is a rarity, so I gave points for that. There were some funny moments with the magic being used. And between Merlin and Arthur with their banter, there was a good few moments. Ultimately, Morgana's plan failed, but it was also fun. We got to see Uther fighting in the tournament, which is also a rarity in the show, so that was fun as well. Obviously, the tournament was fun battles, and there was quite a few of them, so that was nice too. Ultimately, I felt like there was more positive than negative, and that's why I gave it a 7 out of 10. Which brought the personal ranking list to, in first place, Goblin's Gold, The Eye of the Phoenix, The Changeling, The Tears of Uther Pendragon, The Crystal Cave, Love in the Time of Dragons. This episode is also 7th on the personal list, The Sorcerer's Shadow, Queen of Hearts, Gawain, and then in the last place of 10th, we have The Castle of Firen. Bringing us now to our series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, we have Season 2 in the lead at 70.83%, Season 1 in second with 69.23%, and Season 3 so far has a score of 67 out of 110. On the personal ranking side, we have Season 2 also in first place with 70.83%, Season 1 in second with 66.92%, and then still pending its final place, we have Season 3 with a current score of 70 out of 110. And with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Merlin Season 3, Episode 10, The Sorcerer's Shadow. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.